Hello, this is part 61. We are talking about network address translation, preparation for exam NSE4 Fortinet. VIP example, static net, outgoing connection. Now, suppose that the Internet web server, which address is 172.16.1.10, initiates a DNS connection to the internal DNS server 4.2.2.2. And on FortiGate, the traffic matches the firewall policy ID 2, which has NAT enabled. Because the source address matches the internal address of the VIP virtual IP, and because that VIP is configured as static net with port forwarding disabled, FortiGate translates the source address of the packet to 70.70.70.71 from 172.16.1.10. Note that the FortiGate doesn't have to perform PAT, port address translation, because the static net VIP equals 1-to-1 mapping. That is, the external IP is used by the web server only for SNET, source net. Also note that the FortiGate uses the VIP external address for SNET in the VIP is referenced in an incoming firewall policy. That is, if we don't configure firewall policy ID 1, which was discussed previously, if we disable the firewall policy, then FortiGate doesn't automatically use the external IP for translating the source address of the web server. Instead, FortiGate uses the egress interface address, which is 70.70.70. Example of VIP port forwarding incoming connection. In this example, we can see that FortiGate handles two incoming connections to the same external address, but on different ports. FortiGate forwards each connection to a different internal host based on the VIP mapping settings. This is possible because port forwarding is enabled on the VIPs, which enables FortiGate to redirect the external traffic to the corresponding internal address and port while using the same external address. Both connections match the firewall policy ID, which references two virtual IPs, VIPs, as destination. The HTTPS connection matches the web server-ext VIP, and the SSH connection matches the SSH server-ext VIP. Note that for the SSH connection, FortiGate also translates the destination port to 22 from 222. Outgoing connections sourced from the web and SSH server would result in FortiGate using as NAT IP the egress interface address for SNAT, providing there is a matching firewall policy with NAT enabled. VIP matching policies. In FortiOS, VIPs and firewall address objects are completely different. They are stored separately with no overlap. This means that by default, firewall address objects do not match VIPs. In this example of matching policies, destination of the first firewall policy is set to all. Destination all. Even though this means all destination addresses, which are 0.0.0.0/0 by default, this doesn't include the external addresses defined on the VIPs, on virtual IPs. The result is that traffic destined to the external address defined on the web server. VIP skips the first policy. First policy is denied all and matches the second policy instead. And the second policy is allow access to all destination web server, schedule all, service all, and action is accept. So this means that even policy ID 2 deny all, and policy ID 3 which follows it allow access. For VIPs it will be matches. There will be matches for this policy. But what if we want the first policy to block all incoming traffic to all destinations, including the traffic destined to any VIPs? This is useful if our network is under attack and we want temporarily block all incoming internal traffic. We can do this by enabling match-VIP on the first firewall policy. Enabling match-VIP instructs FortiGate to also check for VIPs during policy evaluation. How do we enable match-VIP? We go to Config Firewall Policy, Edit, Deny Policy ID. We put that policy ID number. Set match-VIP enable. Next, end. This way we enable match-VIP on the deny policy. How do we set the VIP as destination? We config firewall policy, edit, then deny policy ID, then set DST ADDR destination address, and then we put VIP, next, and then end. Note that the match VIP setting is available only when the firewall policy action is set to deny. In case we want to block only traffic destined to one or more VIPs, we can reference the VIPs as the destination address on the deny firewall policy. ARP reply option in VIPs, VIPs, and IP pools. When we configure a virtual IP address or an IP pool, ARP reply, Address Resolution Protocol reply, is enabled by default. When Address Resolution Protocol reply is enabled, FortiGate replies to incoming ARP requests for the external address configured in the virtual IP and IP pools. Enabling ARP reply is usually not required in most networks because the routing tables on adjacent devices contain the correct next hop information, so the networks are reachable. However, sometimes the routing configuration is not fully correct. And having ARP reply enabled can solve the issue for us. For this reason, it's a best practice to keep ARP reply enabled. Consider that for example, in the following example, which shows an internet connection between FortiGate and an internet service provider router, we can see a simplified version of the ISP router routing table and ARP table. So we can see on FortiGate VIPs, we can see the VIP type, ext VIP, ext IP 80.80.80.1, ext int and then F, WAN1 interface WAN1, mapped IP 172.16.1.10, port forward disable, ARP reply enable. This is the configuration for VIP. So we enable ARP reply, and we can send ARP request and receive ARP reply, and internet service provider router on port 1, it sends ARP requests and that receives ARP reply from our FortiGate. And our ISP router has its routing table and its ARP table. While testing, the administrator confirms that internet users can reach the web server at 80.80.80.1. The ISP assigns the FortiGate administrator the public subnet 80.80.80.0/24 to deploy internet-facing services. The administrator configured the VIP shown here to provide internet users with access to the company web server. However, the administrator is likely unaware that having ARP reply enabled was key for successful connectivity. So there might be a question if ARP reply is disabled. By default it is enabled, but if ARP reply is disabled, it could be the reason why there is no connectivity. Having ARP reply enabled is a key for this successful connectivity. And the reason is that the ISP router doesn't have a route in its routing table to access the 80.80.80.0/24 subnet through the 70.70.70.2 gateway. Instead, the routing table contains a connecting route for the subnet through port 1, ISP's port 1, which is connected to our FortiGate. The result is that the ISP router generates ARP requests out of port 1 to resolve the MAC address of any of the addresses in the 80.80.80/24 subnet. Nonetheless, because FortiGate responds to ARP requests of the external address in the VIP, then Internet Service Provider router is able to resolve the MAC addresses correctly. Now, questions for self-check, knowledge check. What is the default IP pool type. And the default IP pool type options are one-to-one or overload. Default IP pool type is overload. Which of the following is the default VIP type? Static net or load balance? And the correct answer, the default VIP type is static net. Next part will be about central net. See you in the next chapter.